In light of these comments, staff continues to recommend the trash amendments be applicable to all surface waters of the state, as trash pollution is not limited to those areas listed as impaired, and most water bodies have not been yet assessed for trash impairments. There continues to be a slight caveat in that the waters within the jurisdiction of the Los Angeles Water Board with existing trash and debris TMDLs are exempt, as these TMDLs have been at the forefront of trash control efforts in the state. The trash amendments do direct the Los Angeles Water Board not to reopen, but reconsider the scope of the trash TMDLs. The Los Angeles Water Board has recently started a process of reconsideration. For the WHO, the trash amendments would be implemented through NPDES stormwater permits, specifically the MS4 Phase 1 and Phase 2 permits, Department of Transportation's MS4 permit, Industrial General Permit, Construction General Permit. Additionally, trash provisions would be implemented through waste discharge requirements and waivers of WDRs. Third, the narrative water quality objective would be implemented through a prohibition of discharge. The prohibition would conditionally apply to the requirements present in applicable permits, WDRs, and waivers of WDRs. The amendments would provide that a permittee is in full compliance with the prohibition of discharge if the permittee is in full compliance with all the amendment's trash provisions incorporated into its permit. We received comments that the amendment should also state that compliance with the prohibition is equivalent to compliance with the water quality objective. A similar issue is currently pending before the State Water Board regarding the petition on the LA MS4 permit, and we believe it would be premature for the amendments to explicitly address the issue at this time. Our response to comments do indicate that it may be appropriate for the permitting authority to make the determination. Additionally, the trash amendments have a specific prohibition for pre-production plastics, commonly known as NERDLs. We received comments that this prohibition condition should not minimize the existing pre-production plastic requirements in the Industrial General Permit. The amendment has been clarified that those requirements would not be affected by this prohibition. The fourth element of the trash amendments is the implementation provisions, which detail the what. The centerpiece of the trash amendments is a dual-track compliance approach for MS4 Phase 1 and Phase 2 permittees, aptly named Track 1 and Track 2. The two tracks were crafted from lessons learned from the trash TMDLs in the Los Angeles region and permit requirements in the San Francisco Bay Area to construct a framework using effective trash controls in high trash generating areas. We received a wide range of comments, including providing more direction on how to establish equivalency between Track 1 and Track 2, an increased focus on full capture systems for Track 2, increased flexibility in the selection of high trash generating areas that aren't linked to priority land uses, and allow a mechanism for trash to fit with existing watershed priorities. To provide flexibility to permittees to determine the most effective means of controlling trash while taking into consideration particular site conditions, types of trash, and available resources for maintenance and operation, the trash amendments have two tracks. Track 1 sets the standard and focuses on installation, operation, and maintenance of full capture systems in all storm drains within the jurisdiction of the permittee in priority land uses. Track 2 focuses on implementing a plan of any combination of treatment controls, institutional controls, and multi-benefit projects anywhere within the jurisdiction of the MS4 permittee. In a recent change sheet, we had provided language to highlight that trash controls are not restricted to priority land uses. Track 2 must also result in equivalent trash reductions to Track 1. Based on comments, we elevated this concept with a new term called full capture system equivalency. Additionally, in Track 2, there's an expectation to use full capture systems would be installed where it makes sense and not cost prohibitive, then supplement with other trash controls to best achieve full capture system equivalency. One of the lessons from the existing trash control efforts is that trash is not generated equally throughout a city. To prioritize control efforts, the trash amendments focus in Track 1 on 5 priority land uses within a municipality instead of the entire municipality. These 5 priority land uses are high-density residential at 10 dwelling units per acre, industrial, commercial, mixed urban, and public transportation stations. Essentially, the most trash is generated in areas where the most people congregate. We recognize that areas may generate higher amounts of trash than in a priority land use, and we want trash controls to focus on fixing the problem, so the amendments have a provision for an equivalent alternate land use to allow for the exchange of a priority land use for another land use. There must be a determination of a comparative trash generation amounts, and we clarified in the change sheet that this exchange is not limited to one-to-one substitution, and it can be a fraction of priority land uses. With the equivalent alternate land use, there is flexibility to focus on areas that generate high amounts of trash. As I previously mentioned, we received comments to provide clarity on how to demonstrate equivalency between Track 2 and Track 1. Full capture system equivalency was introduced and defined as the amount of trash that would be reduced if Track 1 was utilized. It is a trash load reduction target that is determined by the permittee through technically acceptable and defensible approaches. The trash amendments provide 2 example approaches, and as further described in the change sheet, the permittee is not limited to these approaches. In any case, any approach selected by the permittee must be submitted in the implementation plan and be approved by the permitting authority. The first example is trash capture rate approach that estimates the amount of trash through direct measurement and applies those rates to similar land uses. The second example is a reference approach to compare the amount of trash in receiving waters with similar loads of trash and installed full capture systems. Related to implementation provisions, the trash amendments focus on full capture systems. A full capture system must capture trash greater than 5 millimeters during certain storm conditions, and the general design criteria must be certified by the executive director prior to installation. This certification process can begin immediately. These full capture systems can range from a catch basin insert to a vortex separator system to a trash net. In the change sheet, we provided further clarification that a full capture system can also consist of low-impact development controls and multi-benefit projects that are certified to meet the design criteria. And thus, with certification, these controls can fulfill dual goals of infiltrating runoff and addressing trash and other watershed pollutants. We did receive a comment to include full capture systems used by the San Francisco Bay Municipal Stormwater Permittees as certified full capture system, and the trash amendments were modified to allow those. So with certified systems from the Los Angeles Water Board and these systems, there's a wide range of full capture systems already available to permittees. Another comment was to provide certification for institutional controls. While staff does not recommend a certification process, the use of institutional controls for Track 2 must be demonstrated to be effective in achieving full capture system equivalency. Recently, staff has heard from many stakeholders about how Track 1 and Track 2 would work within a municipality. We thought it might be helpful to have a couple of illustrations to highlight Track 1 and Track 2. The first example is a very simplified illustration of Track 1. To orient yourself to the figure, there's an example municipality with 3 priority land use types: high-density residential generating 10 tons of trash per year, commercial generating 15 tons of trash per year, and industrial generating 5 tons of trash per year. While under Track 1, the permittee wouldn't have to calculate this trash generation rate. The sum of 30 tons per year will be used in a later example. Under Track 1, the permittee then installs certified full capture systems in all of the storm drains under their jurisdiction of these 3 priority land uses. As far as requirements under Track 1, The permittee would need to submit an annual report, but there would be no monitoring. Track 1 is designed to be straightforward. The second image is a twist on Track 1. Again, there's the municipality with the 3 priority land uses. In this example, the municipality has another land use that generates high amounts of trash. The permittee is able to demonstrate, maybe through a visual assessment approach, that an equivalent alternate land use generates 13 tons per year. This is 2 tons greater than the high-density residential land use. With the equivalent alternate land use approved by the permitting authority, the permittee then implements certified full capture systems in the commercial, industrial, and equivalent alternate land use. In comparison to strict Track 1, the permittee will have annual reporting requirements and the additional comparative trash generation determination. Also, there is no implementation plan and no monitoring requirements. The equivalent alternate land use allows for the permittee to implement the straightforward Track 1 approach and focus efforts to areas that generate high amounts of trash. Now, in this third illustration is for Track 2. Again, we have our municipality with 3 priority land uses. In this situation, the permittee has decided that Track 2 is the preferred track due to the combination of controls and area of high trash generation. The permittee would first establish the full capture system equivalency. If you remember from the Track 1 example, the trash generation was determined to be 30 tons per year. This is the full capture system equivalency, or the trash reduction target. The permittee then implements a combination of institutional and treatment controls, such as full capture systems, throughout the entire jurisdiction. As you can see, these controls are happening within and outside the priority land uses. By focusing a wide range of controls and focusing controls to high trash generating areas unique to this municipality, the permittee is able to control a discharge of 31 tons per year. However, unlike Track 1, the permittee must submit an implementation plan, quantify full capture system equivalency, as well as monitor to assess compliance with the full capture system equivalency. Track 2 provides a greater range of available trash controls to implement in high trash generating areas unique to the municipality. But with the increased flexibility, there is an increase in demonstration and monitoring requirements. In addition to municipalities, the trash amendments also provide implementation provisions for Caltrans. As Caltrans is a linear system, the exclusive use of full capture systems might not be appropriate to implement the prohibition of discharge of trash. Thus, Caltrans requirements are similar to Track 2 to develop and implement a plan of any combination of controls in areas identified as significant trash generating areas, such as highway on and off ramps, park and rides, and highways through commercial and industrial land uses. The amendments were modified to specify full capture system equivalency is required. As there are multiple areas of overlap between the jurisdictions of Caltrans and an MS4 Phase 1 or Phase 2 permittee, in those locations the trash amendments encourage coordination and trash control efforts. As industrial and construction sites are smaller and more readily controllable in comparison to a municipality, it should be feasible for those permittees to eliminate trash from all stormwater discharges. If the permittee can demonstrate to the permitting authority that complying with the outright prohibition of discharge is not feasible, then the permittee would have the flexibility to comply with the prohibition of discharge through a two-track approach similar to Track 1 and Track 2. The second track would also include a similar determination of full capture system equivalency. In addition to Track 1 and Track 2 implementation provisions, we received many comments to have a greater focus on trash generated outside of priority land uses within and outside of an MS4. The trash amendments have 2 provisions for locations that generate trash within and outside an MS4. The first is for areas determined to generate substantial amounts of trash within the municipality in addition to priority land uses. The permitting authority can determine additional areas require either Track 1 or Track 2 trash controls. The second is for an area outside the municipality that generates significant amounts of trash and should require trash controls. Like track 1 and track 2 visualization, let me explain these areas with corresponding figures. Again, to reorient yourself to the first figure, we had the same municipality with 3 priority land uses. In addition, this municipality has a stadium, school, and a road to a landfill that the Regional Water Board has determined to generate substantial amounts of trash. These 3 areas now would require additional controls via either track 1 or track 2. This does not replace track 1 or track 2, but adds to the requirements. Now a second figure is for non-MS4 discharges. Outside the municipality, there's a high-use beach and 2 campgrounds that are generating high amounts of trash to a local water body. The permitting authority can require trash controls for these areas via WDR or waiver of WDR. The fifth element is the when. Actions must occur and time schedules for compliance. We received a number of comments such as reducing the compliance time of track 2, adding a time schedule for areas determined to generate substantial amounts of trash, and added a time schedule specific for the San Francisco Bay Area and East Contra Costa municipal stormwater permits, as these permits have extensive and existing trash reduction requirements. The trash amendments were modified to acknowledge that the San Francisco Bay Area and East Contra Costa municipal stormwater permits are substantially equivalent to track 2, and thus to reduce duplicative efforts, the prior implementation plans may be deemed equivalent to the trash amendment requirements by the permitting authority. Since there are existing trash control efforts, the permitting authority may also set earlier full compliance deadline than as specified in the trash amendments for these 2 permits. In general, for MS4 Phase 1, Phase 2, and Caltrans permits for the trash amendments establish a compliance schedule with interim milestones of 10 years from the effective date of the first implementing permit and no later than 15 years from the effective date of the trash amendments. The trash amendments had a provision for immediate compliance of new development, and due to comments on a lengthy permitting process, we have removed that provision in the March 26th revision. The trash amendments also specify that areas determined to generate substantial amounts of trash, the permitting authority can determine a reasonable time schedule for those specific areas. For the Industrial General and Construction General permit, compliance deadlines will be specified to the first implementing permit. Specifically for MS4 Phase 1 and Phase 2 permits, here's a closer look at the time schedule. After the effective date of the trash amendments, the permitting authority has up to 18 months to either modify, reissue, or adopt a new permit with the trash provisions, or issue a Water Code Section 13267 or 13383 order. The permittee has then 3 months to select either track 1 or track 2, and if track 2 selected, the permittee has a total of 18 months to submit an implementation plan. The implementation plan must be approved by the permitting authority and describe the selection of controls, the full capture system equivalency, and how the controls will achieve equivalency. Once the trash provisions are incorporated into the implementing permit, final compliance must occur within 10 years from that date and no later than 15 years of the effective date of the trash amendments. This time schedule has been sets up extensive time for both planning and implementation of trash controls. In the sixth and final element, the trash amendments provide the framework for minimum monitoring and reporting requirements. We received comments that range from providing more guidance on monitoring, removing receiving water monitoring, and requiring mandatory receiving water monitoring. The trash amendments specify annual reporting requirements for track 1 to document and show the locations of full capture systems. Track 2 and Caltrans would have additional monitoring requirements to demonstrate the effectiveness of controls and compliance with the full capture system equivalency. The draft trash amendments had mandatory questions to answer through monitoring. And the proposed final trash amendments were modified to make those questions as guidance of what to address in demonstrating effectiveness and compliance. The industrial general and construction general permits would specify reporting requirements. In the draft trash amendments, there was a section for time extensions proposed for board consideration and to solicit comments. We received many comments in opposing directions to either retain or eliminate time extensions and regulatory source controls. Based on public comment and the enactment of Senate Bill 270, time extensions and regulatory source controls were removed from the trash amendments. In Track 2, the permittee may establish institutional controls, and such controls may include ordinances. However, any ordinance enacted must reduce trash to aid in achieving compliance with the full capture system equivalency. It is well recognized that trash controls do cost resources. Currently, California communities are currently spending nearly $500 million to control trash. Staff conducted an in-depth economic consideration with two methods to estimate the incremental cost of compliance. The first method was based on the cost of compliance per capita, and the second method was based on land cover. The estimated incremental annual cost to comply ranged from $4 to about $11 per year per person for Phase 1 communities and just under $8 per year per person for Phase 2 communities. For the industrial general permit facilities, the estimated cost of compliance is about $3,600 per facility. Caltrans costs are estimated to increase by $37 million in total capital costs and $15 million per year for operation and maintenance. In conclusion, trash is one of the most recognized pollutants in our water bodies. We have learned many lessons in trash controls from the work in the Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay areas. Together with an extensive stakeholder process, these trash amendments provide consistency and action across the state to reduce trash in water bodies by creating an implementation framework that provides both flexibility to focus resources and target high trash generating areas with effective controls. Staff recommends that the board adopt the trash amendments and take a step towards a trash-free California.
Thank you. Any questions of staff?
A couple of questions. First of all, I believe there's a change sheet. Could you please, first of all, walk through or at least summarize the changes that staff is proposing in the change sheet? And then I'd like to go back to slide number 25 for some follow-up questions.
So there's a change sheet circulated on April 4th, and there was 10 specific changes. 5 of them were to the ocean plan, and then 5 of them were to the inland surface waters and enclosed bays and estuaries plan. The first change is to modify Track 2 in the ocean plan, and the new language is to say the MS4 permittee may determine the location or land uses within its jurisdiction to implement any combination of controls. And with this change, we really wanted to continue to highlight that Track 2 is available, that trash controls are available across the entire jurisdiction within Track 2. The second one is to modify Chapter 3L5A, and that was just a small grammar typo. The third change was to modify the definition of full capture systems, and it was modified to say full capture system is a treatment control or a series of treatment controls, including to but not limited a multi-benefit project or a low-impact development. We struck that it was either a single device or series of devices. And so with this change, we just really wanted to highlight that a full capture system could be a device that you put into the catch basin, as well as a treatment control that would be low impact development or multi-benefit. Either of anything that would be considered full capture system would still have to be certified by the executive director. The fourth change was a small modification to the definition of full capture system equivalency. In the last sentence of the first paragraph, we included language to say that examples of such approaches, and those approaches are how to determine full capture system equivalency, include but are not limited to the following. And we just wanted to highlight that there are many examples or many ways that people can use to determine full capture system equivalency. In the definition, we provided 2 examples, and staff can come up with at least 2 more. And instead of including a plethora of examples, we just wanted to be able to specify that no one is limited to the 2 that are in there. And then the 5th change is under the definition of priority land uses, and it's in the section that talks about equivalent alternate land use. Originally, the language had said that you substitute a priority land use for an equivalent priority land use, and we just wanted to clarify that that substitution didn't have to be a one-to-one or an area-to-area. It can be a combination of a fraction of a priority land use for another area. Really, the take-home message is it just has to be at least equivalent to or greater the amount of trash that's generated. So we don't care what the land use type is, it's the amount of trash that's being generated. And then there are similar edits that were made to the SWRCB plan. I can walk through those repetitively again.
Not necessary. Thank you. I would gather that staff consider these changes to be clarifications rather than expansion or additions at this late date.
Yes, it was just clarification language.
So
I would just add that they were clarified by people's concerns that they weren't understanding what we were trying to convey.
in terms of the flexibility of track 2 as well as expectations regarding full capture devices.
That's correct. And the ability to use multi-benefit or low-impact development type projects if they could meet the certification.
And I think for me, at least, the key here is meeting the certification. Okay. So with respect to slide number 25, I wanted to focus on the second bullet there, MS4 track 2. Demonstrate effectiveness of controls and full capture system equivalency. Now, track 2 has more monitoring reporting requirements than in track 1. For someone who chooses to implement track 2 measures, what would be the monitoring requirements expected of them after they're able to demonstrate effectiveness and equivalency?
So we would expect that people, once equivalency is achieved and demonstrated, that they would either continue the same amount of monitoring or would be up to the permitting authority to change the amount of monitoring and reduce those requirements.
Yeah, and to clarify that the trash amendments that currently provides that monitoring and reporting is required on an annual basis, and it is silent as to whether that would be modified or conclude at the time in which full compliance is demonstrated. So at this juncture, what the express language of the amendments provide is that monitoring is annual.
With the current language, there is no current adjustment after full compliance has been achieved with current language.
So the annual monitoring would still be required unless it is modified by the permitting authority.
That's accurate, and there's nothing in the trash amendments that provide that discretion to the permitting authority. If this board would like for monitoring to be able to be modified subsequent to the demonstration of full system equivalency, that is language that we should insert into the actual trash amendments, that once full capture system equivalency is achieved, the permitting authority may modify the duration of the monitoring frequency. And then it would be up to the permanent authority to do so once full capture is demonstrated.
But in no way should monitoring under track 2 be less frequent or less, should be less stringent or fewer than for track 1.
There is no monitoring requirement under track 1.
But there is reporting.
Yes,
Sorry, I
there
meant
is
reporting.
Okay.
Reporting
excuse me.
under track 1 is limited to where you established full capture, what locations,
And the maintenance and
maintenance that's ongoing, but not monitoring in terms of trash assessment or trash capture assessment. It's expected, of course, that implementation of full capture systems does achieve it pursuant to the certification process. So the monitoring is really limited to, traditional monitoring as we understand it is limited to track 2. If this board determines that the monitoring duration after full compliance has been demonstrated in track 2, if the board believes that monitoring should not occur annually but potentially should be every couple of years or every 5 years, that's something that we could include to provide the permanent authority that discretion. But currently the trash amendments do not provide that discretion to the permanent authorities.
Thank you. I asked because I obviously received a lot of inquiries regarding that, and just so you know, that might be something that I would like for us to re-examine at some point, but it's not something that I certainly, as one board member, will be supporting we make that additional change today. But it is something that has been flagged and something that we should keep in mind as we examine at some point the effectiveness of these amendments once it's been implemented. So with respect to this, my only other question, one that I think others have similar concerns with, is this demonstration of full capture system equivalency. You know, Johanna mentioned that we received a lot of comments and requests for guidance on this full, you know, this equivalency determination. What is staff's thinking with respect to ensuring some consistency amongst the permitting authority in terms of this demonstration? Are we proposing guidelines? What is the mechanism going forward to ensure some outreach and some understanding and some consistent implementation of equivalency?
So we're really not proposing to try and make it consistent across the state. What we have heard in our outreach over the couple of years is that cities are different and they have different issues related to trash and different ways that they would need to address that trash. And so what we tried to lay out was what is the criteria, the performance goal, which is that it would need to be equivalent to installing full capture in the priority land uses, so that we ensure that we don't set up a system that allows for essentially minimizing their effort, but we didn't want to force a one approach to how you would determine if you're meeting that. There are lots of different ways that you could meet that, and it seemed to us that that was more appropriate at the permitting level, though, with the regional boards for their MS4 permits and with us for our statewide permits.
I guess it's another one of those items that I would flag for us to look into after some period of time of implementation.
Steve, did you have any questions?
Let's see. On the point of, let's see, the point you brought up about track 2 monitoring, I think, you know, it might be useful to provide examples, real world examples, but for instance, you know, institutional controls, when I think about you know, the choice of doing full capture decisions at the local level versus doing some more institutional controls, which include ordinances, which include working with local businesses, it may be, or schools, or whatever it is, it may be a trash source, and coming up with an approach that may not involve infrastructure, that the idea of backing off of monitoring to show that that works year after year, I don't think that's technically supported. You know, I think I need to be told examples of alternatives to full capture that once in place we can count on and don't have to have any kind of surveillance to make sure they continue. So, you know, in that discussion that Board Member Dodick brought up, you know, I as a track 2 model, look, we don't need to build things here, we can do this other approach. There's a burden of proof that other approach is consistently meeting trash reduction targets over time. So reduction of monitoring out of the gates, that's problematic for me. One thing I want to, you know, draw a little attention to the change sheet, and maybe ask staff to explain a little further the idea of low impact development, green street, green parking lot type infrastructure investments to achieve watershed plan, multi-pollutant, multi-benefit, recharge, et cetera. Why that technically can be a full capture system. I'd like you to explain it, but just one food for thought for the audience is full trash capture by definition in the proposed policy is anything that captures a particle greater than 5 millimeters in diameter. So what that means is full capture allows particles less than or equal to 5 millimeters to go directly into waterways in certain situations. A well-designed system that disconnects impervious surface from waterways, such as a green street, should disconnect the pathway for less than 5 millimeter particles to the waterways. Just some food for thought.
So the concept here is that we set up a performance target for what is full capture, and that is a combination of both particle size that you mentioned, but also of storm event size. And so if you design an infiltration basin to capture that level of storm event, you by definition are also capturing the particles, and there's no reason that that couldn't be considered a full capture. Now, there are other LID projects or BMPs that wouldn't qualify. A flow-through device that slows particles down and allows for sediment to drop out is a perfectly acceptable LID device, but wouldn't qualify because it wouldn't retain the particles. So you'd have to look at each one, and the way we tried to set this up was to allow for those to be certified, to make it clear that we would allow them to be certified. We had always assumed that anything that met the particle size and storm event could be certified, but by the comments it seemed clear that maybe folks thought of those multi-benefit projects as something separate and different and only available under track 2, and we wanted to show that they could be available under track 1.
So this isn't, or there would be a concern that a municipality would say, well, we're not going to do full trash capture because we have this LID plan, we're going to be done by 2035. Would they be able to get a free pass on that?
They wouldn't be able to get a free pass. They'd have to actually certify their devices or their systems to show that those would make it, and then they'd have to meet the time schedule, of course.
Of these amendments. Okay, thank you. I think, you know, or just before we get comments, there has been some confusion on a term, but we defined the term in the proposed amendments, but the idea of regulatory source controls. It seems like it had been operationally, and based on response to comments, it's really referring to the idea of banning products specifically, as opposed to a more generic definition of regulatory source control, which might include, a city permitting a business to, patrol and clean up its trash. You could say that could be a regulatory source control at a local level, but that's not how it was defined.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind, too, that we still have the concept of ordinances in the amendment. So the type of things that the cities and municipalities might want to do are certainly still within the realm of what could be done through the amendment.
Yeah, no, thank you. That answers that question. Thank you. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Dee Dee? No? And I have no questions. I want to reiterate that the comment period did close August 5th. Now, we got lots of letters, but the comment period has closed unless we open it. And my recommendation is that we not allow the late letters in. But I'd like to hear from my colleagues.
I would certainly support that in terms of, essentially starting a whole new round of, accepting comment and requiring staff to respond to comment. Having said that, though, I want to, I guess, look to legal counsel. Obviously, I can't make the distinction between comments that I heard and read that came in after the official comment period. Not that any of them were extremely, different. It's just a continuation, I think, of concerns that have been expressed all along. So does not accepting late comments mean I have to somehow figure out a way to purge and forget all that? Because I don't think that's possible.
I'll speak to this initially, and then Phil can chime in. The comment period did close in August, and let's specify the distinction between written comment period, which would require written responses, versus continuing the allowance of oral comment, which today we're accepting oral comment. We did provide in our notice on the revised documents that we sent out December 31st, 2014, we identified that we would not be accepting written comments on the revised documents, but that at this date, at the adoption meeting, we would accept oral comments. And that was to, we want to encourage public participation, but we wanted to ameliorate the burden of having to undergo another written response period. And although the submission of written comments is beneficial and desirable, what we recognized is that the revised trash amendments, to which folks would like another opportunity to respond to, those revisions in and of itself were responsive to the prior public comment that we received. And so essentially it was a policy determination of, at some point in time, let's bring the back and forth, the written back and forth, to resolve to a conclusion, and allow for oral comment. In terms of the legal requirements are encompassed in our CEQA regulations, our certified CEQA regulations. And what those require is that revisions to the staff report or the amendments have to be recirculated for another round of written comments and written responses only if the revisions implicate a finding of environmental significance. And with our trash amendment revisions, it was really logistical and procedural, and didn't alter any of the environmental findings with regard to the reasonably foreseeable methods of compliance. So given that kind of legal constraint or the legal limit, we then balanced, at what point in time should we bring the actual written back and forth to a close.
I'll just add a little bit, which is certainly our view is that the amendments that staff proposed in December and then again in March and again just last week with the late changes, those are all clearly a logical outgrowth of the original version that people had plenty of opportunity and took opportunity to submit written and oral comments. I do want to stress, though, that people are certainly free today to stand up and present orally their concerns with the version that's before the board today. As far as anything that you may have received individually as a board member or any discussions that you had, this is not an adjudicative proceeding. This is a quasi-legislative proceeding, and so I'm not going to ask you to wipe your minds blank from those conversations. And I do think that it's appropriate, just out of fairness to the parties who actually read the notices and did not submit written comments because they were directed not to, it does make sense to not accept those written comments into the record today.
Thank you for that clarification. I certainly would then support the vice chair, was it a motion or whatever it was, decision to not accept any written comments that came in after the August deadline.
But we are anxious to hear from each of you. However, we have 31 cards. I am likely to get more as the time goes along, based on past experience. So I'm going to suggest a 3-minute limit and that seems to fit with most of the requests that have come in. I will be starting with Kat Coleman, followed by Jane Diamond, and then followed by 5 organizations, starting with Leslie Tamanen, Jen Erkley, Sarah Sikich, Sean Bothwell, and Sarah Amizada. And will all of you come up close, sit in the front row so that you can just pop up and do this quickly. Okay, the first pop-up. Kat.
Thank you, Vice Chair Spivey Weber and board members. Catherine Kuhlman, I am the Deputy Secretary for Ocean and Coastal Policy at Resources and the Executive Director for the Ocean Protection Council. And I just wanted to direct your attention to the letter of support, not a comment letter, from the Secretary of Resources that you should have received. And that was on behalf of the Ocean Protection Council, which includes your Secretary of Cal EPA, along with Gavin Newsom, and 2 public members, Geraldine Natz and Michael Brown. As you know, trash is a huge pollutant in the ocean, and we're looking forward to your adoption of this policy, and would like to offer that we're very interested in how your policy actually reduces trash on our beaches, and would extend the offer to work with you folks on perhaps some kind of a study that would answer some of the questions about how effective the regulatory scheme has been in reducing trash on our beaches. So I urge support. Thank you very much.
Jane.
Awesome, and we definitely take you up on that. I, as you know, love the idea of performance reports and report cards, so I would expect one for the implementation of these amendments.
Yes, and we'll look to other partners in addition to the Ocean Protection Council. Thank you.
I've never had trouble getting a mic to stay low enough. So I'm happy to be here today. Thanks, Vice Chair Spivey Weber and board members for allowing EPA to be here and to lend also our support to your adoption of the trash amendments. We're very encouraged to see this coming forward at a statewide level after the early efforts made by the 2 regional boards that were mentioned by the staff. And we really, in Region 9, we have really focused a lot of our effort cross-programmatically on marine debris, very concerned about the public health and aquatic resource impacts of marine debris, and the volume of trash coming from land-based sources as a very high percentage, like 80% of the contribution. Some of the data I was given recently as I was preparing for this, it's just amazing how much trash is still going into the oceans. A February report listed data from 2010 saying that 80 million metric tons of trash were going into the world's